This video is brought to you by 3, bringing you 4G at no extra cost.
This is the Sony Xperia Z3 Compact. It's the easiest Android phone available right now to recommend. You're watching our full review, so we're going to carry on talking and you're going to find out why if you stay tuned. And we're going to start off as per usual by talking about that design. And you've got a Sony Xperia phone, surprise, surprise, omni-balanced design, very rectangular look and feel. But boy, does this one feel a little bit better than the predecessors. It's got a rubberized surround and many people, ourselves included, were like, no, they've foregone metal for plastic. But if we pull a Z3 into frame, we can be very candid here, and while the Z3 does feel more premium, it feels more expensive. It looks like it would be better pulled out of a suit, the copper version out of a handbag, the white version out of an expensive tennis bag. This looks like it would be easily pulled out of a pocket, which we can't necessarily say about all pockets we know in the Z3. In fact, it's also a lot less grippy. That's the Z3 by contrast to the Z3 Compact. And generally, for an active device or a device that's waterproof, we quite like having this really nice rubberized material on the sides. It's also clean, it's pearlesque, available in a range of colors. Each color has a different character based on that material. You can see the green one here has an almost oceanic quality to it. You've got a mandarin color as well, and a black color. The black one is the most elegant, and you can hardly even notice that this is rubberized on the black one. So Sony's given everyone a range of options, and the in-hand sensation across all of them is fantastic. So that's how it feels in the hand, but what have you got dotted around it? Well, on the front you can see a 2.1 megapixel front-facing camera. It's capable of recording full HD video, and you've also got a sensor as well as stereo speakers, one up top, one at the bottom. The display is 4.6 inches by contrast to 5.2 inches on the Sony Xperia Z3. While we have the Z3 in frame, we can also do a slight size comparison. We can bring the camera up ever so slightly so you can see the top of the Z3 is significantly higher than the top of the Z3 Compact. It's also wider, but the Sony Xperia Z3 Compact is thicker. Again, that extra girth adds a little bit of assurance to the in-hand sensation of the phone. If we're to pull in a couple of other devices, we can say pull in a Samsung Galaxy Alpha, which does have a metal frame. No waterproofing. The Samsung Galaxy Alpha is a very expensive feeling device. It's got a slightly larger display, 4.7 inches by contrast to 4.6, but it is quite a little bit taller, as you can see. Tiny bit wider, not much wider though. It really is that metal frame and a completely different look and feel. It has much more of the Z3 premium factor to it than the Xperia Z3 Compact, but much less fun factor. Now pulling in an iPhone 5S, and the 5S really does just illustrate how good the screen to bezel ratio is on the Sony Xperia Z3. Side by side, almost as tall, almost as wide. The iPhone 5S has a 4-inch display by contrast to the 4.76-inch panel on the Z3 Compact. And finally, iPhone 6. iPhone 6, 4.7 inches, Sony Xperia Z3 Compact, 4.6 inches. And this is a real teller. Look how bezel-licious the iPhone is. It's also a little bit wider, but it's mainly the bezels. Sure, it's slimmer, but it goes back to what we were saying. The Sony Xperia Z3 Compact feels much more grippy, much more becoming of a device of this size, but it also belies the immense power under the hood here, which we will come on to later naturally. Talking about that screen though, and you can see 4.6 inches triluminous 720p panel, 319 ppi, very good. Not quite as bright as the iPhone, but the actual quality is almost there in terms of the pixel count, as a pixel count on the iPhone is 326, so under 10 pixels per inch more. We can pull in closer and you should be able to make out the kinds of sharpness that you can expect. Again, very comparable to the iPhone, saturated colors, and indeed comparable to the Xperia Z3, which is one of the best screens out there. Sony also says the Z3 and Z3 Compact screen technology is new and improved in order to improve the battery life, which is astounding. Again, something we'll come on to later. Taking a look at some of the controls Sony gives you over the actual screen itself, and we can see if we jump into our display settings, we can actually tweak how effective the X-Reality for Mobile display engine is. We can make everything super vivid, but we don't want to do that. We want to leave it as it is, but we do want to check out our white balance control. Jumping into white balance, you can see you can control control red, green, blue, standard RGB, etc. What you can also do is control things like tap to wake, so you can turn the screen off, double tap the screen in order to have it wake. And like we mentioned earlier, you can actually clear your viewed notification when you pull down from the top by toggling in, and this is in the personalization setting. There are also a few other things, but they're really the main ones that have anything to do with the screen. So that's what you've got on the front of the device. On the right hand side of the device, you've got a power button, a volume rocker, and a camera button. This two-stage camera button is pretty fantastic. The Z1 Compact had a very difficult camera button to press. It fires up the camera very quickly, takes a picture very quickly. Down at the base, you've got a lanyard connector, one side of the stereo microphones. Up at the top is the other side, and a 3.5mm headphone jack that's exposed. Obviously, this phone is waterproof, so all the other ports are under flaps, and they all reside on the left-hand side. On the bottom of the left-hand side is a My Nano SIM card slot, and if we close that up, the top of the left side is a micro USB connector and a micro SD card slot expandable by up to 128 gigabytes. A few commenters were asking, are the slots going to get worn out? Well, potentially. You see, we had a slight issue with one of our early review samples. Our green one kind of has a habit of opening itself ever so slightly. You may be able to make that out, and that might impede on the waterproofing. Now, this is a pre-production sample, but Sony has assured us and told us to tell you guys, if you do get one of these and you have any issues with anything like that going on, Xperia Care will sort you out. We've had great experiences with them in the past. Now, as far as that flap goes, it's worth just quickly pulling in the Sony Xperia Z3 in frame. We love one of the flaps on here, and that's a micro USB port. This is a flap that's going to get opened every single time, standalone as well, and it just looks very cool and feels more secure than the wider flap, which houses the micro USB connector, sorry, the micro SD card slot and the nano SIM slot. So we would have preferred that kind of a flap on the Sony Xperia Z3 Compact. If anyone has any doubts as to how long their flap will last, get one of these. This is a Sony DK31 charging dock. You can pick one up for around £16.90 on Amazon, and just plonk your Xperia Z3 Compact down on here, and magnetic dock connector flips everything into landscape orientation, charges your phone at the same time. We can flip it around so you've got less glare on that, and hopefully you can see the utility of that, taking advantage of that dock connector and meaning that you won't have to unflap those flaps every single time you want to charge your phone. You can also get a standalone cable that just links straight into this, although it's a little bit flimsy. Now, on the back of the phone, you can see that 20.7 megapixel camera. You can also see a flash and an NFC contact point. And that's the design of the Xperia Z3 Compact, weighed up against a few of the competitors and generally striking a very good balance of performance and power and pocketability too. We've talked about that screen, so now it's time to talk about what is inside that screen, and that is Android 4.4.4. Android is good. Sony makes Android a little bit better in many ways, not least of all customizing things like the screen. We're going to start off by telling you about the basics, and you can see you've got a pull down bar from the top. One thing Sony does is every time you pull down the bar and swipe up to the top, you have an option to clear that bar, which we'll show you later. You've also got 2-finger pull down, which activates quick toggles, and that can be edited using this bar at the bottom. Jumping out of that, we can go home, and you've got a range of home screens which you can populate with widgets and shortcuts to applications. Finally, our applications tray. This has a range of folders that you can create, or you can just view things alphabetically or in most used or installed order. It's also got a shortcut to the Google Play Store and the Sony Select Store, so you can access apps in a range of ways. A couple of things that we're not massive fans of. For starters, swipe up from the bottom, and rather than just having your Google Now option, you've got a What's New option, and What's New is something we're going to come on to, which is Sony's bloatware. Open up the Sony folder. There is a lot of pre-installed Sony stuff on here. We've actually uninstalled some of it, like the Kobo e-reader store, and which isn't bad, but we just don't want it on our phone. And of course, Garmin, for example, SatNav. What you do also have are some very cool things. You've got LifeLog, for example. LifeLog tracks exactly what you do, when you do it, etc. It's a bit creepy. We've already talked about this with the Sony Xperia Z3 review. It kind of tells you how long you spend doing certain things, and it'll tell you what applications phones are used for what amount of time. So it's telling us we're on our phone for 2 minutes, we're in Facebook, or etc, etc, using secret. So it's really, really interesting to see how you actually do use your phone, but a little bit creepy too. Integrates very tightly with Sony's fitness accessories. So if you're looking for a more general lifestyle management accessory, like the Smart Talk Band, for example, or Sony's upcoming smartwatch, you can definitely expect the LifeLog application to be tightly integrated with that. So Sony's bloatware has some very, very nice elements, and indeed that PS4 remote play is going to allow you, when it does launch later this year, to use this as a display for your PS4, hook it up to a DualShock controller, and it'll even integrate the speakers, etc. Awesome stuff using the same tech as a PS Vita. If we pull out of that though, generally the Android experience is very tight with Sony devices. It's very clean, very elegant, and easy to customize. So pinch out and you can see that's where you can control widgets, applications, wallpapers and themes. Tap through on themes and we can very easily change the whole look and feel of our phone. If we tap the tri-flat theme, for example, give it a couple of seconds to just swap everything out, and it looks like we've got a custom launcher on here, but we haven't. This is pure Sony through and through, and in turn you can expect the standard level of Sony stability on here, and it's just swapped out all of our applications and widgets too. So Sony in a nutshell, very good user interface. One thing we will say, we would have loved to have seen it evolve even more. This is super similar to that which we saw on the Z2, the Z1 and the Z1 Compact. So if Sony is watching this, please make your user interface really align with the physicalities of your phone a little bit more. This is very reminiscent of what we saw on the Sony Xperia Arc, for example, despite the fact the actual body looks and feels so different. Check out what HTC is doing. The HTC One M8's user interface really does complement the whole look and feel of the M8 and did the M7 and has evolved accordingly. For the most part, you get a thumbs up with that user interface side of things. Now, as far as multimedia goes, it is awesome. 4.6 inches, sorry, never did bring with it such high quality audio. This has the same kind of quality audio you'd expect from an Xperia Z2. The Xperia Z3's front-facing speakers are a little bit louder. Indeed, we did a speaker comparison between the two, and with a Jabra Soulmate Max as well, so you can check that out if you're interested. So the audio sounds cool. The screen looks very good. 4.6 inches is big enough for most people, but it's not gonna bulge your pockets too much. And what's more, thanks to the fact you've got that 16 gig of internal memory and expandability by micro SD card, there should be ample room for most of your music. The 16 gig internal memory may not be enough for a lot of gamers out there. Now, we said this very heavily in our Xperia Z3 review. We've got a few games on here, but we have more games on our Z3, and we managed to fill up that memory in about 2 weeks, which really doesn't bode well for big gamers out there. So Android either needs to get better at allowing apps to install onto the SD card, or you just need to buy a phone with bigger memory, or hopefully Sony may release a special edition with 32 gigabytes down the line. That would be our ultimate. What games it does play though, it does so very well. You can see we've got some 2D games on here, we've got some 3D games on here. Gets a little bit warm, but not crazy hot. So definitely one of the better gaming devices of this size as far as performance goes, obviously with its 2.5 gig quad-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 processor and 2 gig of RAM. Movies look stupendous on here. Sony supplements Video Unlimited on here, obviously, but you also have all your standard Netflix, you've got Crunchyroll, Pokemon TV, all the applications that you'd expect from Android, taking full advantage of those front-facing stereo speakers. You've also got active noise cancelling headphones as well, so that's digital noise cancellation that you can buy to supplement your experience too, which work a treat. As far as the camera goes, by default, despite having a 20.7 megapixel sensor with an f2 lens, the Sony Xperia Z3 Compact, just like the Z3, Z2, Z1 Compact and Z1 before, it takes pictures at 8 megapixels. Superior Auto makes a lot of decisions for you. It can figure out if you're reading a document, if you're pulling up close and going into macro, a little icon that says macro appeared there. We can take a quick picture and you can see, despite that resolution being lower, it still takes a fair quality picture and pull in, but it also has a very bad habit of overexposing that picture And that's really where it falls down by contrast to other camera phones. One of the main areas, we just did a comparison between this and an iPhone 5S, it actually didn't win out in that comparison. If we were to jump into manual though, that's where anyone who wants to get a little bit more in control of their shooting can tweak things. And one of the things you will definitely want to do is drop that exposure a little bit. So if we bring that right back into frame and take that same picture again, we can see dropping the exposure, and that's literally the only change we made. Took a more evenly exposed image, looks higher contrast, looks a little bit more pleasing and less blown out in the background. So that's shooting. You can also shoot manual video and have control over your full HD video as well. Nice that Sony gives you that option. Wish Superior Auto wasn't quite as overexposing as it is. Now on to the other shooting modes, and you've got sound and photo. That takes a picture and puts some sound to it as well. And you've also got AR fun, multi-camera, face in, 4K video and live on YouTube. Now we've seen 4K video before, we've seen time shift video too. Live on YouTube broadcasts what you're recording to video live. Face in is a picture-in-picture, which we've seen on other devices. Multi-camera takes the same scene, records it from various angles and then stitches them together. And you can share it with a community. It's really, really nice. AR fun, now that's the cool one. If we were to let our Sony Xperia Z3 Compact figure out how flat our surface is, we can then drop some gnomes on our surface, as you can see, and we can throw some balls at them. Those stereo speakers coming into force. If we threw one, then the gnome will actually catch it and throw one back at us. Unfortunately, this app has a habit of crashing every now and then, which isn't ideal, but you can do a lot of cool fun things before it does crash. Make them dance for joy, for example, and you can also write on the screen, so Btekt, right, Btekt, thanks autocorrect, and draw that there, and boom, you're done. And if we pull in closer, we can see augmented reality working nicely, perfect for kids, just a little bit of fun for adults too even. So jumping out of that, lucky it didn't crash at that point, we can see the rest of the shooting modes are pretty extensive. Creative effects is actually really nice, giving you a whole load of effects that you can overlay your shot. So it works in a much more comprehensive way than just a filter. It does give you a warning though that if the temperature rises, just like with 4K video, as this is a little bit more intensive graphically, it might actually shut down. And it did that for us a couple of times. So jumping out of that, you can also download a shed load as well. So the Sony camera experience is just that, an experience. It isn't just a camera app, which is great. One thing we didn't mention is how hard it is to cover up those stereo speakers. So if we were to just quickly play a track, for example, up the volume all the way, cover up the bottom one, you can still hear it. Cover up the top one, you can still hear it. How cool does that sound? Now if we were to do this with a Samsung Galaxy Alpha, exactly the same track, you can see while the sound it produces isn't necessarily bad. Again, flick it to max volume. As soon as you cover it up, which you're going to do pretty often when you're gaming or watching a movie, it just absolutely mutes it. So moving that out of the way, we can do exactly the same quickly with an iPhone before moving on. Same track once again, loudest volume, nice and loud, but so muted. Real shame, but at the same time, a really nice highlight of the Sony Xperia Z3 Compact. Moving on to performance, and we've already said 2.5 gig clock speed, Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 processor, 2 gig of RAM, unsurprisingly only pushing 720p resolution. This thing performs amazingly. The benchmarking scores really do illustrate, well, exactly that. We can compare it against the competition, so jump into ranking and you can see it actually, let's open up our bar chart, beats out the HTC One M8, for example. So you've got super flagship spec on here, super flagship performance, but again, £350 in the UK, super impressive price tag. Expandability, like we mentioned, is up to 128 gigabytes by micro SD card, and you've also got great connectivity with 3G, Cat4 LTE, not to mention NFC, as well as Wi-Fi, etc. Everything you're going to expect from one of these devices, Bluetooth 4.0. It's pretty much nailing it across the board, but the final hurdle is always battery life. And how does the Sony Xperia Z3 Compact perform? Well, incredibly well. If you think about the fact that 2600 milliamp battery is the same capacity as the HTC One M8, which is a 5-inch screened device, you really aren't going to be surprised that this thing can last up to 2 days. In fact, it beats out the full Xperia Z3, which we were really surprised about. So that extra little bit of girth once again is completely justified with a huge sell in here. And of course, Sony's great battery saving technology, making the Sony Xperia Z3 Compact, exactly like we said when we opened, the easiest Android phone to recommend. Great design, great screen, great user interface, although we do wish it was a little bit updated, but you'd have incredible performance on here, fantastic multimedia capabilities, a camera that you can customize to account for any weaknesses that it has, amongst the best image stabilization in video out there at the moment. Good gaming. We would have liked more memory. A 32 gig version down the line would be much appreciated. Thank you very much, Sony, but more importantly, thank you very much for this phone. Hopefully you've enjoyed our review of the Xperia Z3 Compact. If you've got any questions about it or any other device that we've reviewed, we've used, put them in the comments section below. Make sure you stay tuned to Btekt. We'll be posting loads more on these devices, and of course our iPhone 6 review will be coming very, very shortly. If you want us to try anything out with that, make sure you let us know. Thanks for watching Btekt.